On the screen, you can see the harmonic properties of a minor blues. The structure of the minor blues is characterized by the presence of traditional tonal progressions. For example, the tonicization of the subdominant in measure 4 uses an applied dominant 7th chord or secondary dominant C7, and the motion to G7 in measure 10 is prepared by the flat 6 harmony. That chord, A flat 7, is one of the notable exceptions to the otherwise normative root movement found in the basic blues progression. When you compare the root movement of the minor blues with that of the basic blues progression, you can hear that they are almost identical, with the exception of the chord built on flat 6 scale degree in measure 9. Let me play you that progression so you can kind of hear the sound of the minor blues. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have a new chord, A flat 7 going to G flat 7. There are a couple of ways that we can explain the structure and the placement of that chord and its function. You know. So first one is to basically, this is like an upper neighbor of G7. Nice way of preparing and anticipating the structural harmony. But there is a more interesting way of explaining the nature of that chord, besides its upper neighbor relationship to the structural dominant 7th. And it is to point out that its tritone relationships to the chord built on scale degree 2 that normally occurs in that location. Remember, in measure 9, in a major blues, we had a 2 chord moving to 5 chord. So in the minor blues, in measure 9, we have an A flat 7 chord, which is tritone away from the D chord. That should have been there, but it's not. But we'll kind of explain how that relationship works. And in order to do that, we have to introduce a very important concept in jazz theory called a tritone substitution. On the screen, you can see the 3-step process of explaining how does tritone substitution work. So first, the diatonic version of the 2 chord is changed to the dominant 7th chord. So let me explain what I mean. In our Mr. PC progression, the 2 chord should have been D minor 7 flat 5, going to G7, going to C minor. And in measure 9 of the regular blues, that's what happens. G minor, C7, 1, 2, 5, 1. So in minor blues, since we are in the minor key, we're going from minor 7 flat 5, going to dominant. So first thing, we'll change the chord quality of the 2 chord from minor 7 flat 5 to dominant 7, to major. And that substitution is quite common at the predominant level. And we've already encountered that substitution in other locations of the blues. For instance, at the turnaround, measures 11 and 12. In F major, we have 3, 6, 2, 5. We have a minor 7 chord, minor 7 chord, minor 7 chord. We can easily substitute these minor chords with dominant chords. without violating the rules of voice reading. And jazz pianists and jazz guitar players frequently do these kind of substitutions, just to enhance their harmonic vocabulary and add some harmonic spark in the realization. So first thing, going back to our Mr. PC progression, we change the quality of the predominant chord from minor 7 to flat 5 to dominant 7. Right? The next thing, while keeping the guidons of D7 in place, see what happens. When we transfer the root up or down a tritone, doesn't really matter, because tritone subdivides the octave into two parts, so it doesn't matter where we go. You know, so if you go up a tritone, we're going to go to A flat, new root. So when you listen to the sound of these two chords, dominant type of chord and A flat, they are both of the same quality. But see what happens to the status of these guidons. In the diatonic version, F sharp, the third, becomes flat 7. And the seventh of D7 becomes the third. So it's kind of reversal status. So the new harmonic root redefines the quality and the status of guidons. And that's really, really, really important. So you can see how we get from predominant, diatonic version, dominant, change of quality, to tritone sub. And that's our chord that happens in measure 9 of the minor blues. But the harmonic status, functional status of these two chords is exactly the same. You know, it doesn't matter when we play this. This is far more choralful, I think, as opposed to, and it's another advantage. Check out the voice reading between A flat and G flat. It's stepwise, as opposed to moving by fifths. So the tritone substitution then has its theoretical origins in the symmetrical division of the octave and in inversional invariance of the tritone. To summarize, the tritone between the guidons is invariant. It basically stays the same. And the roots of diatonic and chromatic versions of the dominant seventh are tritone apart. In fact, any dominant seventh chord, diatonic, can be replaced by its tritone counterpart, which in many cases enhances the overall harmonic progression. So for instance, leaving our blues discussion for a moment, there's a great standard tune called What's New. It starts with 5, 1, right? So it sounds really good when we play the diatonic version of that progression. But if we replace the G7 with the tritone substitution, we're going to get a completely different and unique harmonic color. So compare the sound of the diatonic version of this cadential gesture 5, 1 to a tritone substitution change. Tritone sub, diatonic, and tritone sub. Okay, so there are in our minor blues, Mr. PC blues, there are 3 places where you can experiment with your tritone substitution. And on the screen, you can see these 3 locations. And these new dominant seventh chords are written in red. So in measure 4, we have G flat 7. In measure 9, we have A flat 7. And in measure 10, we have D flat 7. Remember what happened in measure 4 in the original version? We had C7 chord. So the relationship between C and G flat, tritone apart, right? Same thing, we've talked about A flat 7, so you know what happens. It replaces D7, but D flat 7 is a tritone sub of G7. So now when I play that progression with tritone substitution, it will sound completely different. So let me play it with the metronome. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And one more with that tonic version.